Welcome back and good morning. Well, people want to have more coffee to wake up. Good morning. Yes, I like that. So, we are excited to begin our next session, which is hosted by IMD, which is our official academic partner. Thank you for supporting the World Women Davos Agenda 2025. And I would like to introduce you to Dr. Jennifer Jordan from IAMD to start the session because we are running a little bit late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rupa, and it's our pleasure to be your academic partner. I'm Jennifer Jordan. I'm a professor of leadership and organizational behavior at IMD. And welcome to the panel on the future of women on boards. At IMD, I direct the program, Women on Boards. The five of us are sitting here at a pivotal time in our society. We are at the precipice of a dramatic shift in the way that society and business sees women and leadership. So on the one hand, from Europe to the Middle East to Oceania, we see regulations coming into place saying how many women need to sit at the boardroom table. And at the same time, we're seeing a fairly significant backlash in DE&I efforts around the world as well. So for example, just in the last 18 months, the collapse of a Silicon Valley bank, the dismantling of a plane midair in the sky, and most recently, the inability to fight the LA wildfires have all been blamed on the prioritization of DE&I efforts. And in my role at IMD, I witness this tension firsthand. So on the one side, I see leaders super enthusiastic about having more women taking a seat in the boardroom. So for example, now in Europe, we have about 1/3 of seats in a boardroom or in the boardroom occupied by women, and that's a 3% increase from 2 years earlier. So there is progress. And on the other hand, we see in our clients cuts in DEI initiatives and also taking away jobs from DE&I officers. And this is what we're here to talk about today, the future of women on boards. And how can we have a significant positive impact on that? It is my pleasure and my privilege to introduce the four speakers that are here with me on this panel. So to my left, first I have Constanza Schweinsteiger. Constanza is a partner at the consulting firm Roland Berger. She has more than 20 years of experience in strategy, organization, and HR consulting with a focus on transformation processes. And prior to consulting, Constanza worked in the aerospace industry. Next to Constanza is Sigrid Arthro. Sigrid is the managing director of Spencer Stuart's business in Switzerland, and she leads the CEO and Swiss board practice. As a member of the global industrial leadership team, she focuses on bringing the firm's advisory services to life in order to drive impact. Sigrid is the co-sponsor as well of the Swiss chapter of the Women Corporate Directors Network. And a fun fact about Sigrid, she grew up both in Nigeria and in Switzerland. We are also joined here by Katie Jackson, who is the CEO of Rio Tinto Copper. Prior to Rio Tinto, Katie's career spanned several continents through her roles with companies such as Shell, UBS, and Equinor. Katie has a strong operational, strategy, and commercial experience, and a particular passion for solving challenges to make global projects work. In addition to her operational roles, Katie is a non-executive director at IMI and the chair of Powerful Women, an initiative focused on gender balance in the energy sector. And last but certainly not least, we have Sheila Lirio Marcello. She's the founder of Care.com. Maybe many of you have used that in your lives. And the founder and CEO of Ohai.ai, a startup aimed at using artificial intelligence to improve the lives of families. Sheila has been nominated with a number of honors and accolades, including the Forbes 50 over 50 list, Fortune's top 10 women entrepreneurs recognition, a Henry Crown Fellowship at the Aspen Institute, a Young Global Leaders recognition by the WEF, and she is the youngest person to have ever received a Harvard Business School Alumni Achievement Award. So with that, I turn it over to my fellow panel members to make an opening statement. Please, Constanza.
Thank you. At this point, we're really with the question "Women on Board." We're at the heart of the corporate world, and I think it's good we discuss it in this panel, because in the end, this is an important area for women to thrive and to really excel. You mentioned we have more than 30% of women in C roles and on board at the moment in Europe. But it's only 30%, and it's not 50%. So we're talking equality moonshot here, and we've been discussing for the past 2 days. So the path to equality, there is really some way to go. Is it only through DI policies? Probably not. Are they important? Probably yes. And I think that would be my key message from the background that I bring with here to this table, industry and consultancy. I've seen developments being slow without quotas and without policies installed, without any regulations. And if you look to the corporate world, where is it successful, the participation of female? Where do we really see improvement in boards and in supervisory boards, on C-levels and everywhere in leadership positions? It's usually where companies took the step to really enforce by rules and regulations. There were long debates at the beginning of my career and a lot of arguments against that, because we were discussing at that time also the merit-based careers. But ultimately, at least I understood that merit-based is also a point of view that you take. What is a merit about? And it's a lot of perception. So we should really discuss in the next minutes that we have the role of a regulation and policies and the importance. And just as Dr. Ngotzi said about trade before, in the session before, I think we are beyond the point of no return. It's just we've gone so far that even with the backlash that we see now in certain areas, I think we will not fall behind the developments that we've seen over the past years. So let's stay focused, as she said, and we'll go.
Thank you for the focused and positive view. Sigrid, please.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think we have seen a steady progress of women in the boardroom. We haven't, over the past decades, we haven't seen that progress of women in the C-suite. And that is actually something we should address and we should have a look at. And I think to avoid us stalling and going backwards, we need a relentless focus from everyone and from all sides. So from governments, from investors, from boards, and from management. And why do we need that? Because diversity is not just good because of the focus and of us wanting diversity, because it's good for the business and the impact. It's good to have diverse voices in the boardroom, because it leads to better outcomes. It leads to better debates, and better debates lead to better decisions, and better decisions lead to better outcomes in the end. And that's why we want more women in the boardroom, and not only more women, but more diversity. And that's why we need to push and should not give up.
Thank you so much. Katie, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually echo a number of those sentiments. I was thinking back to make a few comments about why Powerful Women, which is indeed the UK energy body I'm involved in, why that was actually set up. So it's 10 years old, and it was set up by members of the UK government because they kept having meetings on energy with a group that they really considered to be, well, frankly, pale, male and stale. And there was genuine concern that the lack of diversity of thought and experience in that group, wasn't really bringing the best decisions for consumers to the fore. And so they worked to establish a body to change it. And Powerful Women actually collects data, which I think is a big part of sort of really shining a light on the reality of the situation. And it's now 10 years old, so it's been collecting data for 10 years on representation of women on boards in the UK energy sector. And there has been a big change in terms of numbers in that time period. So there's been a threefold increase, and it's now around 30%, which still lags the rest of the UK. So the UK FTSE 250 has actually just hit 40% women on boards, which is, really a very significant step forward. But I think then, to echo the comments that my co-panelists have just made, the progress on women in sort of key decision-making roles, so executive director roles, chair, senior independent director, those kind of roles, that has been much, much less impressive. And so out of the, I think, 80 companies we follow in the UK energy sector, only 3 of them have a female CEO. And if you look at the Fortune 500, it's about 10% with female CEOs. So I do agree. I think the focus needs to shift to ask the question, why that's not moving as fast. And I'm not sure. I really hope that we've passed the point of no return, but I do worry, actually, that progress is pretty stuck, particularly for those key decision-making roles.
Thank you. And Sheila, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to echo some of my co-panelists and what they're saying. I have been in the space of what people label as love, soft, it's the care industry, it's a women's issue. And so for 14 years in founding and running that company, I became an advocate, not realizing it, for women by actually starting to talk about it with data and objectivity, that the care economy is really the work that makes all work possible. And it drives the economy because if 50% is supported, that allows them to go to work. And instead of filling in the potholes for the infrastructure to go on the road for the car, and we spend trillions of dollars in the United States for that, I became an advocate that says, you know what? No one's even going to get in the car if there's no care infrastructure at home, because you're not going to leave your children and your parents at home without care. And so what I started to do was really focus on the objectivity and talking a specific language to the audience that I needed, which was mostly men. I used to go to a lot of women's events like this one, and I started to realize later as I was running the company that I needed to talk to more men and get access to them to speak in feminist terms and understand and really value feminism. And so that became really important, but the way to do it was through data and objectivity, which my co-panelists have actually started to emphasize. And so the data is there, that women on boards with those companies, 19% better outcomes. So we just need to keep this drumbeat on the data. The second is not only trying to really work on our sons to become more feminist, many of you are nodding, but it's also, and I have 2 boys, 32 and 25, it is my personal passion, and I consider them feminists. I'm now a grandmother. I'm super proud of that. My son's a feminist. But the second is women helping women. I'm here because I was invited by a dear friend, Jocelyn Mangan, who ran Him for Her, a Lumen Impact that is putting women on boards. She's now placed 175 women on board. She wants to do it internationally, and that's how I met Jennifer. She's super passionate about this, so I'm really here to pay it forward to support her and her nonprofit that I've been advising to help put women on boards. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So bringing on these themes or carrying forward these themes, that's going to be my next question to the 4 of you, is with this backlash that we see in DE&I, how do you think this is impacting the momentum? And what can we do to actually counteract any momentum that it might be bringing in the negative direction? Maybe I could start, Sigrid, with you.
Yeah, I think even if we have that backlash that is actually starting in the US, because some things that started in the US, it's not that far. It will land in Europe and it will soon be here, but it doesn't mean that there will be a backlash. It's always a phase. And I think that doesn't mean that the expectations from investors or from, the likes of Glass Lewis, etc., will change because of that. And I just want to take the point of data. If you have the data, the only counter that we can bring is show the data that diverse boards have stronger financial performance than other boards. And then no one can actually counter that. And that means that you still need to have the boards that show that diversity will just have stronger and better performance than others.
And what we are doing at Spencer Stuart is also showing that data around the world and gather statistics to actually bring evidence on that. And that is a way actually to prove data and have statistics against that, to help board increase and actually also push the women and diverse placements to be successful on that.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. And Katie, how about for you?
Yeah, so I also, I guess I agree there is a backlash, and I think actually we see quite a lot of that through the corporate world when we check in on culture and employee engagement. And actually I think it is a global feature, at least as I see it. I think it's really important that organizations and leaders stay the course. I do think it comes down to the business case, but I even think the business case is simpler than the kind of returns argument, because I think unless you have visible female leadership in a company, it's quite difficult to attract women into that company. And I think that fundamentally women make up, 50% of our talent pools, 50% of the communities we deal with, 50% of the broader stakeholder landscape that we deal with. And so if I look at an industry like mine, so I'm in mining, I've been in oil and gas, so natural resources industries, it's crucially important that those industries access the best talent, and talent isn't necessarily gender distributed. It's difficult to attract talent to those industries. We're not as sexy as tech. And we need to be, really getting the best brains, the most innovative minds in, and that means we need to attract women as well as men. And then we also, for us, some of the biggest issues we face are about how we engage with the communities that we operate in, and we need to be able to understand, relate, communicate properly with those communities, and I think we need to have a more diverse workforce to do that effectively. And then finally, I think Rio is about 25% female, so I obviously spend most of my time in a kind of male-dominated workplace, and I spend a lot of time talking to men about these issues, and I do think that's really important. I also, I only have sons, sadly, and so I do actually feel a real responsibility to kind of enlist men, and particularly all my colleagues who have daughters, enlist them in this debate too as well. And actually, when I talk to men about the kind of workplace they want to turn up in every day and the kind of culture they want at work, fundamentally they do also want somewhere where they can show up as their own self and express their opinions in a very open and sort of safe way. And I think most of the men I work with reflect that more women in the workplace actually helps that rather than hinders it. So I do think we have to recognize the backlash, recognize that with change comes normally a reaction, but actually have an open conversation about it.
Thank you, Katie. And I think that's such a great point to make, is that DE&I is not a woman's issue or a black person's issue or a handicapped person's issue, right? It's an issue for men as well, the majority as well. They also want to feel included. Very good point. Thank you. Please, Sheila.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Katie, first of all, very impressive in mining, in copper, to be the female CEO. Big hand. I can't tell you. You can call tech sexy, but to actually do that in mining, you know what I'm saying, is like a whole, that's a game changer to have your voice there at the table. So pretty impressive. So for me, I'm going to say something crass, but it's actually super important. I think we need to follow the money. And why does that matter? Because in this next decade, the baby boomer population and the great transfer of wealth of $30 trillion, the size of the US GDP, will be going to women. Let me emphasize that. Going to women. So if we follow and write our pocketbook and invest in startups and growth companies, that's who these VCs listen to. They listen to the LPs. To get in there, to write the check yourself, learn to be an angel, learn to be an LP. Don't be afraid of it, because that's going to actually influence those companies that go public. Because as Jocelyn was up here the challenge we have with public companies, especially the IPO market has shut down for a little bit, it'll open back up, is that those seats don't turn over very often. And you guys know this in the recruiting side. So if they're not turning over very often and there's very few spots, some of the most well-qualified women in the pipeline are fighting for the same spots. Well, why not join the growth companies that you're going to help take public? And then if you're on the LP side, start to fund and be an LP at these venture capital firms. Go to the AGM meetings, influence the partnership, be the GP yourself, because this transfer of wealth will make a stark difference on boards because money talks. These VCs listen to the LPs about what matters. So I think that's going to drastically change, which is why I'm still bullish, even though, you know, I hosted one of the biggest financial firms. He's a good friend, a CEO. We were on a board together for a while, and I hosted him for dinner last week. And he said, we're changing the language, but we're not changing anything we're doing. Right? So I think they're trying to stay on the DL, down low, as we would say, as my kids would say. But the reality is they're keeping up with their programs, they're tracking their data, they're still pushing diversity as much as they can and trying to get through this phase and period. But I think we need to give the chance for money to talk and for women to really get engaged here.
Thank you, Sheila. And I think you also mentioned that, right? Investors, how do we get investors on board? Ingrid, I mentioned that earlier. And I think it's very interesting that you say that, right? Because it's not only about do we keep the programs in place, but it is what is visible. So yeah, changing the language has a big effect, right? Even if the programs are still implemented. Constanda, what about for you? Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I think just to add to all that has been said, and I just think it's all very important points. I think we should also look out to not dramatize the situation. To really take it as a backlash that comes with transformational processes. I do this as a profession for most of my time, so I'm quite aware that there comes a time of resistance, and we should just take it as that and really stay with our cause and be sure. And I think all the arguments that you brought up are very important. Nonetheless, I think we should also force for more female participation on C-level and on the SVB boards, because that's where you make the major decisions and that's where the power is in the corporate world. If it's not there, then we only are reduced to a workforce that helps the C-level. And what we want equality, and that is also equality in decision making and in power. And we should be clear about it. We should be outspoken about it. I think you tend to be a bit shy about it as females oftentimes, but we should clear and outspoken about it.
Thank you. And I think, you know, if we look at the point of the C-suite is super critical, right? Because if we look at what is a classic feeder into board, takes a role in the C-suite, especially, at least I've heard the unspoken rule to become a chair is have you been a CEO, right? And so these are things that we need to be focused on. And I'm going to take on Dr. Nagazi's focus on hope and say, okay, what is going well, right? We have more women sitting on boards than ever before. So that for me is a ray of hope. And also in this, at least still in the US, I've seen surveys at the end of 2024 with 80% of people, men and women, saying they would not want to work for a company that did not prioritize DE&I initiatives, right? And so hopefully the people will speak out against this. And I think more than ever, it is my focus to not only have women talking about this issue, but also having our majority allies, the white males, standing up and talking about this issue. And I've always thought that was important, but I think that's more important than ever. So that is going to be for my next year in my role at IMD, even in our guest speakers in the programs, having males speak about this issue rather than females. I think that is critical right now. My second question to you is, we talked about the backslide of DE&I, but what other barriers remain for women aspiring to board roles? And how can business society help to bring down some of these barriers? Maybe Sheila, I start with you on this one.
Sure. If Jocelyn was here, and why Illumin is so important, you know, I met her years ago. Care.com and OpenTable had a partnership, and she was running product there. I was so impressed with her that I nominated her for the Aspen Crown Fellowship, which I had graduated a few years before that, and her project was actually this. And originally she named the organization Him for Her. And then I had said to her, I said, it sounds like it's only guys supporting women. It really should be. And so she changed it to Illumyn with a Y, ILLUMYN, impact. So you should definitely look it up if you're interested. What makes this so unique and what created barriers that she saw was that she would host dinners and meals. And of course, her background, Open Table, Danny Myers supported this, and soon Jeff Weiner, Reid Hoffman, all around the globe. She would host these dinners and invite men on boards, and also women now, right, on boards already, and have, the binders are full. We all know the binders are full of qualified women. And she would have women there and introduce them, because the barriers of access was her key thing. That was the problem, that most boards positions were being filled not only with amazing recruiters, but it was also through access and networks that became personal. And so through meals, at something so simple, a mission like that has made a difference to put 175 women on boards over the past decade. And so she's just continuing this on. And it's private and it's personalized, and people get to know each other. There's also a lot of fears go down and myths go down when you're eating a meal together, maybe having a glass of wine together. And so the barriers for her of access was the most important thing she was addressing.
Thank you, Sheila. Constanza, what about for you?
Yeah, I think that's really a wonderful way of introducing female talent to a C-suite that might be a bit shy about it before. And as you just mentioned, I can just underline also from my experience, most of the jobs are actually being handed over through the network. And this is a hidden space, and it's very difficult to enter and to be acknowledged there. Once you're in, it works for women as well, from my at least experience and perspective, but you have to get in, and that's difficult. It's also difficult for most men, by the way. So this is not a female privilege. I'm still, the argument that I brought up in the first round, I'm still believing in policies at some point, because I'm working on transformational issues, focus on organization and people. I do a lot of those processes that also do the recruiting process, the life cycle of someone in the company, the development. And I think it starts very much there also, that you introduce and really follow up, bring things into transparency, have set goals that you really follow up, and they should be goals that include DEI it doesn't have to be quotas, but things that you kind of raise awareness towards, and that you really go not only into the numbers, but also into the qualitative aspects. As I mentioned before, what is merit? This is a lot around perception and less around numbers. So we also have to discuss, and it's very worthwhile to discuss with men, and you need the guys on the board. You need the guys in the discussion, because they are also part of this. So you really need to bring their perspective and really discuss and really also respect their position, even though you might find it a bit strange at points. But you show them respect, and then bring them show them the numbers, and then let them allow for some time to think it over, and then come up with the daughters and the nieces. And oftentimes also you can ask them about their wife. Usually a lot of them respect their wife a lot. So if you respect your wife, maybe it would be good to have someone with a female perspective also on your board seat.
And I think Constanza, I've been thinking a lot these last few weeks, because I get the privilege of doing that in my role, right? And I was wondering, how did we get to this place? And I think one of the things that we, and I say we as women, maybe didn't do well is getting them on board earlier, because I don't think we would have this backslide if they were on board. And so I have my opinions on why we haven't gotten them on board, but for me that is going to be the criticality going forward. Maybe Katie, please.
Yeah, so I again would focus in, I think, the question to getting women into those key decision-making roles, rather than just on boards, because I do think in terms of total board representation, there have been dramatic improvements. But I still think it comes down to really two things, probably leadership and culture. So even though I work in mining, actually 5 out of our 12 exec are women, and we've got 4 businesses, of which 2 are run by women. And my last job was in electricity transmission, and there we had 5 businesses, of which 4 were run by women. And that is a lot down to the personal leadership of those CEOs and the choices that they make in terms of who they put into their executive committees. And I think we need CEOs to that's my point about staying the course, to keep thinking more imaginatively about who they put in roles. And where I've seen companies make the most sort of strides, it's often still down to the leadership of a particularly foresighted CEO. So that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is, of course, making sure that there's a pipeline of women behind those women, and that's the part that I think we're still struggling with, attracting women into companies, but most importantly retaining them, and I think a lot of that comes down to culture, and again really leaders working on, particularly in the kind of industries I'm in, which have historically I think cultures that well, at least optically don't look that great from the outside. Having leaders who are really willing to work on culture. Rio's been through quite a deep process, including having an independent review of its culture, publishing a report called Everyday Respect, and then reviewing progress against that 2 years on and seeing how the culture has changed. And I think that process has also proven to me that it is very important to everybody, not just women. It's actually very important to men also that companies have a culture where they can show up and contribute. It's actually also really important for operational companies like mine for the safety aspect of work, because you want people who feel able to stick their hand up if something's wrong or being done wrong, and who have the safety in their workplace to raise concerns. So yeah, I think it's leadership still, but also that focus on culture.
Thank you, Katie.
Katie, I won't repeat your first point, but I think that's a super important barrier, is the leadership element. So I'm absolutely with you on that. Another point I'd like to share is what 2,300 most senior women shared with us about what their obstacles is. And we have done just published, by the way, just now, how far have we got? It's what they shared about being their barriers to move on. And it's internal and external barriers. And it's actually summarizing nicely what the panel has shared. It's first, if we talk about external barriers, what these 2,300 leaders around the world shared with us, it's old school leadership, it's women held to different standards, it's lack of career support, it's networking disadvantages, work politics, for example, as being defined as external barriers. But there are also internal barriers, which include insecurity, fear of failure, self-doubt, lack of self-confidence, and I'm not able to sell myself. I think that's also very important to understand where we need to work on.
And I guess that's my job at IMD, right? Is I get to work with women every day to help with those at least internal barriers. What I would like to say, I'm going to reiterate a lot of what was already said and add a couple of things as well. So where I see the two barriers is pipeline, right? In Europe, 20% of executive seats are women, 8% of CEO seats are women. And as I said, right, we know that that's a classic feeder into board seats, and at least I've heard it's never written down, but if you want to be a chair, you better have been a CEO. And so the pipeline issue for me, and I work more with executives at IMD than I do with non-executive directors. And so I'm thinking about how can I help companies to strengthen that pipeline. And I think it's also about the biases that organizations have, right? There's evidence that men are promoted on potential, whereas women have to show, or are more likely to need to show the abilities in the here and now. And I think the second barrier is network, and we talked about that already, right? We tend, birds of a feather flock together. In my research, I'm doing research right now about how do people, women and men, get their first board seat. It looks like especially women get it through their network rather than a headhunter. So it's like, how do they strengthen those networks when the decision makers, the gatekeepers, are normally white men, the chairs, the CEOs, and sometimes even the headhunters are the gatekeepers. But especially with the network, the CEOs, the chairs, how do they strengthen that? So I love any type of programs like what Jocelyn is doing to get the networks strengthened for women. I'm going to now, though, go back to you, Katie, and ask specifically, what can CEOs do? Because you are in that rare role, that 8% in a CEO role. What can CEOs do to get this going forward?
Yes, sadly. Oh.
You want to use one?
No. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, cool. No, sadly, I'm not a top coach. No, it's not fine. Okay, right. Teamwork. Honestly, I can cope with my technical profession. No, I'm sadly not a listed company CEO yet. I just run the copper business, but I do think that it is still that a lot of the responsibility does still fall to leadership. I actually hope that we will achieve a point in the future when it doesn't fall to leadership, where it's where the tipping point has been reached, and we have a more diverse workforce just by sort of osmosis. But we're not there. So it's about a few things for me. I mean, I do think targets are important, and actually measuring is important, because I think if you don't set a goal and if you don't measure where you are, it's very easy to lose track. So I think that's important, and that's one of the things I think we need to continue to push for in amongst a more difficult environment right now. And then I think it is about having the vision to take more. I don't want to say, but to take different hiring decisions. I think it shouldn't be like that, but as you said, I think it is often seen still as more of a risky choice to put a woman in a role. I think we also need to get much more comfortable with the fact that we will have some phenomenal female leaders, and then we will have some female leaders who are just okay, and there might even be a few who don't perform, and that's like the same as the population of male leaders, right? It's not like every female leader has to be an absolute superstar. So I think we need to get more comfortable with a diversity of different female leadership styles, and sort of some who are absolutely hit it out of the park, and some who are just okay, because that's of course what we have in our male population.
That's a beautiful point, Katie. And I think, what we know, right? If you're the minority, you just stand out. And so I can tell you because I work with them, there's a pretty normal curve of male leaders in terms of their skills. But because there are fewer women, the ones that are average or maybe underperforming just stand out more, and we remember them more. And that is an issue in terms of bias and how we think about female leaders, and there's evidence that we do hold them to higher standards as a result, and that's more pressure, more stress. Super, thank you. Sigrid, what about for you from the headhunter? I mean, you're working at one of the most important gatekeepers in terms of the boardroom, and what can firms like Spencer Stuart do to help this issue, and what are you doing?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I mean, just one anecdote is, for example, that when a male chair or a nomination committee head says, "Well, she is different," well, yes, yes, and then have the discussion that and so what? Yeah, you want a female leader, and they are different. but that is the reason why you want a female leader. And then go into the debate about the pros and the cons about appointing someone who is different and how that is helpful to the organization, to the team, to the inspiration, to the outcomes, to the debate, to the entire team, to the room. So that is one. And I'm not shying away of having that and challenging the client on that. Then the second thing is the pipeline that Katie mentioned. It's about making sure the pipeline is not short term, but the discussion is always long term and in a constant and continuous way. So the succession starts on the day one, the person that is replaced for starts her or his job. And I'm talking male or female. I'm not making a distinction here. It counts for both. And be ready with a succession pipeline and look into the organization. Identify your high potential in the whole organization. Go deep down. But, distribute wildcards for your greatest women in the organization. Do something like you do in tennis. Give wildcards to the best people in your organization. Give them the chance to develop quicker than with other organizations. Give them the chance to jump over hierarchies. Bring them in your top 200, let's say, a curriculum. Because why should they wait? They are the best talent in your organization. If you wait, someone else will take them out. It's the truth. The best talent, there is a war for talent of the best female leaders. Give them the wild card to perform in your organization. We just need to be creative to retain the female talent in your organization, for example. Things like that. I'm just creative. I'm challenging, them wherever I can. I'm just doing things like that, and I love it. And we're moving forward on that. And I'm very passionate on that. So that's something I'm doing. So we're not giving up here, even if there's a backlash.
Thank you. Super. And Sheila, right? I mean, it's undeniable that the political conversations, environmental changes, business changes are impacting the conversations we have on this topic. How do you think it also changes the way that society, business needs to think about who sits around the boardroom, who is at the table? How is that conversation also needing to shift?
Thank you for the teamwork up here. So the who. I'm just going to close my eyes for a second to answer this question, because Jennifer, you had teed up this thing about stress. I was one of the rare, I think at the time, the 7th woman who had taken a company public when I took it public in the U.S. out of the 6,000 in the history of public companies. You know what I mean? It's like, it was a lot on me. In fact, my body had given up. After selling care.com, I bumped to exec chair, announced, because you're running a public company, we'd either hire a CEO or you have companies bidding to buy it. And as a board, we decided to sell it. Even though it was my baby, I was actually ready to let it go. But I went through this journey that now I talk a lot about just being me. My body was telling me something that my mind and my heart and my ambition was still trying to go after. The stress of too much pressure on the role modeling, just too much, just a lot. And so this theme of just being me that I'm gonna say, we have a diverse audience here of many different backgrounds. Some are gonna go after the CEO role. Some are in nonprofits supporting women who are trying to get women on boards or just even supporting the pipeline. So on society in general and who, I say this to everybody in the audience, just be you. Play the role that you can feel and the reason you're here in the audience to support what you're doing. I'm supporting Jocelyn. She's trying to put women on boards. That's not my role specifically, other than I can host dinners and invite other women to try and introduce them to male CEOs that I know. I can do that. I decided, just quickly, that I wasn't gonna do care anymore because I was so stressed out. But the calling to me was, I still had to do it. So my new company is still solving productivity at home for the chief household officer. I labeled it that because I didn't want to deal with the diversity and inclusion problem, right? Because also my husband also at times was a chief household officer. So back to Jennifer on the who, I've decided that to be authentically bold, to just be me, to find who I really was, where I wanted to spend my time, where was my energy to move the needle, how can I help put women on boards? There's a lot of different roles that you can play. I have a starfish principle. You got to start somewhere, and all of you can play a role in this. It doesn't have to be that everyone is destined to be the CEO. Yes, but could we help more women become CEOs? It may not be me, but I've decided to build again. I think I may decide to go, if it meant to be, to take this public again and beat myself up again. I don't know. But the more important thing is I'm following what's in my heart, to just be me.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for joining us. Constanza, one last remark from you before we close the panel.
Just very briefly, it's not really a summary, but just to remind everybody, C-level, executive positions, board level is about not always being nice, and sometimes saying no comes difficult, especially for women. So we should be aware of it, that this is what you need. Find the inner strength. This goes for you as well. This fits into your story. Just find yourself, find your strengths in yourself. And then also to the others in the room, to the board members, they have to learn to accept a no by women. We are not always nice, especially if we are in board positions.
Thank you. And what I would say is that stands out, or that resonates with me so much. I remember one of my favorite leadership coaches once saying to me, remember, Jennifer, leadership means not always being liked. And that's sometimes very hard for men and women to swallow, right? So as we close, two thoughts I want to just leave you with. One is the women themselves. So in my work, I believe I help women to have that voice and that impact that they already have in the boardroom, and how do they bring it into the boardroom. I don't like to think about giving women more confidence, because in my opinion, the reason that women sometimes do lack confidence is because society's done a great job at kind of beating it out of us. So I hate that, like, women need more confidence, but just how do you voice the value that you bring? And then the other one is, my next year is around bringing male allies to the table. Thank you so much.